Hello and welcome to the Spotlight. This is episode number 269. I know we've been on a hiatus for a while, but we're back and we are talking about Stranger Things season 3. I am with my co-host, the one and only Jen.
Doing great. I actually in Hawaii here. We're not suffering from the same kind of heat wave that everybody else is across the nation. So I'm feel super blessed today to
It is
not be sweltering.
it is so hot. As you guys can see, I'm clean shaven today because I said, you know what, I don't need a hot beard. I think I'm gonna go beardless and mustacheless until the weather changes. So I just said, you know what? I just decided this morning I'm going to shave and get some of the heat off my face. So, I'm glad that you are here, and I'm excited to talk about season 3 of Stranger Things. Um, I think I think before we start with season 3, we're going to talk about the whole season, and of course there will be spoilers. So if you don't want to be spoiled, if you haven't seen it, you may want to watch the show and get caught up, and then listen or watch the program. But I want to start off with because we've never done a podcast on Stranger Things before. I think we've talked about it in a very overview sense
Right.
before, and we're not going to go back and really review season 1 and 2, but I do feel like I want to talk about the evolution of the show in a real fast, to get through it so we can get straight to season 3. Season 1, in my estimation, was this breath of fresh air. Like, it came out, and with a lot of shows, especially sometimes a lot of Netflix shows, it you know how Netflix shows will come out, and you'll be like, it'll be this big buzz, like with what was that movie, The Bird Box, how everybody was
Oh
talking about it.
yeah, yeah.
And like Netflix has this thing, they can get the people to talking about it. And I remember when Stranger Things came out, I was literally bombarded with people saying, "You haven't watched Stranger Things? You haven't?" I knew you seen it because I didn't see it right
Right.
away. It was like quite a while before I saw it. I think you might have been one of the ones that were like, "You haven't seen Stranger Things yet?"
I definitely was.
Right. And I mean, it wasn't that I was against it or anything. I just hadn't got around to it. And I really had, it was one of those few things where I absolutely had zero knowledge of what it was about. I had no idea what it was about. Like I couldn't tell you, generally even a show that you haven't seen, you've seen enough marketing of it where you can be like, "Oh, this is about this."
Yep.
I didn't know anything. I didn't know who was in it. I knew Winona Ryder was supposed to be in it, but I didn't know where the setting was. I didn't even know what the tone was. I didn't know what kind of genre it was. I just heard this thing called Stranger Things. And I remember when the pilot episode starts, and it was kind of that scary scene, in the
Oh
facility.
yeah.
And I was like, at first I was like, what is this? Like, like this is like some horror shit. Like I didn't even know what it was. And I was kind of surprised because the people that were telling me to watch it are not necessarily horror buffs. So that's why I was kind of surprised, like in the opening scene, like, wait, what is this? This is not, this isn't something that the people that were telling me to watch it that you would normally get from them. And then as we continue, hey, Ben Tuttle, big shout out to Ben Tuttle, and I'm gonna see him next weekend. Ben Tuttle, he'll be in LA for the first time, so I'm looking forward to that. But I remember seeing it, and then kind of easing into it, and then I realized this is a good show. This is a great show. I don't know if I was hooked on the first episode, but I would say I was hooked maybe the third or fourth episode. And I'm gonna get to why I really got into it, but I just want to ask you this question: like, how long did it take for you to get hooked on the show? Was it right away? Did it take a couple episodes when
I
you
um
just had to watch it?
so just I mean is a little bit different of an experience for me because I had some advanced press on it and I felt like it was going to be really good to begin with. There's just some material that I look at and I can sort of, I don't know, not see into it, but sometimes you just get a good feel. And I watch
Mhm.
a lot of entertainment, a lot of media. So I thought, okay, this looks really good. It's got nice production values. And it spoke to a kind of nostalgia that was just perfect for me. And I think that after the first episode, season one, episode one, I was so hooked that I asked my kid to come in and watch it with me. So I watched the first episode again, and then we binged the entire season in a day. We stopped watching it, I think, at like 3 o'clock in the morning. We had started sometime in the early afternoon or something, or maybe it was even a little bit before. But basically, we watched the entire season in one day. So that's how hooked we were. And just sort of as a point, I don't usually binge shows because I like to digest them. I like to think about them. I like to go through the episodes and really kind of come up with a point by point discussion in my head about what I want to see and what might happen and all of that. So for me to binge watch it, it was kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Well, I was same thing. I ran through it. I ran through it. Once I got hooked, it was like it was like crack. And the thing that got me, that made me really into the show, was I love conspiracy stuff. And some who may know the whole Montauk situation, I recognized it right away. I saw the connections in it, and I was aware where they were drawing the inspiration from,
Mm-hmm.
and one of those situations, those I don't want to say conspiracy because it's a real thing, but I love like conspiratorial type stuff. I love like the Illuminati type, things and stuff like that, and to the point where they even had like crisis actors, in the storyline. I love that crap, right?
Right.
And to see it in a mainstream story was pretty cool. So that really got my attention, like the whole secret government base type thing and all of that. And then of course the 80s nostalgia and stuff. But so I recognized where they were drawing the inspiration from, much like True Detective season 3. I recognized where they were, the real stories that they were drawn from, and I follow all of that kind of stuff. So that got my attention, and then of course the acting performances and whatnot. So season 1, for example, and we're not, like I said, we're not going to review season 1 or 2, but I felt like season 1, they really did a solid for Winona Ryder, because, and I even heard them saying that they wanted this to be kind of like her comeback type thing, right? And there's a reason why I'm bringing this up as it relates to season 3. We'll get back to that. But yes, Winona Ryder was amazing, and they gave her great material, and they really, like, her character was awesome, and she did an amazing job. And she really, it really played up her best attributes as an actress, what she can really bring.
Right.
And I don't know, if I'm trying to remember, have we ever seen her as a mother before on something? I can't recall where she's like a mom ever.
I can't think of anything right off the top of my head either.
Yeah, so that was a little different because I'm not used to her. She's usually like these quirky characters and stuff. I'm not used to her being the worrisome mom who's, but she was amazing. She's a so talented of a person, and she was definitely the revelation, I thought, of the adult actors. Also, David Harbour, who plays Hopper, if you follow his work, when I saw that he was the lead in this, it blew me away, because if you followed his work pre Stranger Things, he's always an asshole and everything. He's like this. If there's something where there's corrupt cops, and he's one of the characters, and they haven't like told you yet who's the corrupt cop, he's gonna be the corrupt cop. He's gonna be the one that's taking money from the criminals and all of that. He's a low-key asshole with the art in Stranger Things. Yeah, that is totally him. So what? And I had never seen him as a lead. He's always like douchebag number one, in on stuff, and he totally was great as the lead in this. He gave everything that character needed. One thing I love about his character too is he's wonderfully sloppy.
Right.
That makes sense. Like he is sloppy in a way that's perfect for his character. Where it's not sloppy to the point where you're like, dude, get the hell away from me. But it's sloppy. I don't know how to explain it. His sloppiness.
So
Yeah.
one of the things that Stranger Things season 1, season 2, and season 3 has excelled at is creating characters that are true to their form, true to life. They have authenticity. They have quirks in behavior that don't make them completely above reproach. No one is above reproach. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone feels like they've got enough. Quirkiness isn't the right word, but something very close to that, which lends itself to every character in Stranger Things that I've come across, except the ones perhaps that are sort of marginal and on the outside. They end up feeling very real. I was actually really nervous in season 3 that the character that was introduced, Alexei, was going to end up being sort of a super trope of something that was then going to be, oh God, I can't believe that they did this. But the more that it went on, the more that character actually took on an actual life of his own.
We're gonna get to season 3. I really want to just kind of set it up.
Well, I'm just saying that like each one of the, or not each one, but all of the characters, including even the most ridiculous of characters, still feels very authentic all the way through. And actually, you know what episode, or what season really did it for me to make that super clear was season 2, because in season 2, everybody has to grow, and they don't just grow; they evolve. Like actual people evolve because they're growing. The writers have done an excellent job in that respect.
Well, and just to kind of, because I really want to kind of do to get us to season 3. So the two main adults, Hopper, and of course Winona Ryder's character, Miss Wheeler, right? Yeah. And then also welcome Alex as well as Ben back to the room. The kids, the kids are like perfectly cast. Every kid does a fantastic job. And the one thing I have to say is, when I saw the black kid, initially, what the hell? Let me block this guy.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, sorry about that. When I saw the black kid, every time, I'll be honest with you, when I see, people of color in a mostly white.
His name is Lucas, by the way.
Lucas, right? The black kid. Look at me, right? Like when I see people of color in Lucas, right? When I see people of color in especially shows where it's mostly Caucasian cast, I always get worried because I always feel like a lot of times Hollywood doesn't have the best track record, and that's me being nice. I don't know why I'm being nice today. It has a terrible track record with how they depict people of color, right?
Right.
And so very early on the show, I think it was like episode 1, there was a scene where they were getting bullied, and one of the white male characters called him Midnight or something like that. So I was sitting there like, okay, it's going to be this. Okay, this is what this show is going to be, right? And I believe that was the only time where his race was ever mentioned ever on the show. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
That he was able to exist as just a character on the show. When they tried to make Lucas the black character, Winston from Ghostbusters. Oh yeah, that's funny. That was funny. Yeah, that's true. That one was too. But I have to give them credit though that he's able to just be a character on the show. for the most part, right? That he is not that they don't black him on the show, right?
Right.
And I think it's very important because that we're able to just be, and like I said, that one scene in the pilot made me cringe because I'm sitting there like, is this what this show is going to be? A bunch of that going on the show, and when it really didn't rear its head again, I was actually, that kind of really let me enjoy the show even more,
Well, can I speak to why I think that might have happened?
Mm-hmm.
I think that might have happened because, again, I will praise I haven't about a lot of stuff, but in this particular instance, I think that the writers actually looked at the way that kids see the world, and where it's important we see a grown-up view of things, but most of the show is centered around what the kids see. And other than when somebody bullies you, or other than when it is convenient to understand what race is, a lot of kids don't actually see things the way that adults do. And so for them, they're not seeing Lucas's race as much as they are seeing Lucas as a member of the party. I mean, basically, he is a part of the group, in quotes, and that is sort of it definitely has a bit of sly writing on the back end, because it would have been just as easy to keep going with that trope and make it that feel like, oh yeah, that's sort of part, or relegate Lucas to sort of the relegate Lucas to the sort of character equivalent of Winston in the Ghostbusters, where he's kind of important to bring up some things, but he's really not important to the group. Does that make sense?
Right. Like, and my thing is this, like, I'm not one of those people that want to have it where racism doesn't exist and we live in this utopian world. But sometimes I think it's cool just to sometimes I think in this kind of material, to just let people exist in the world where it's not pointed out, oh, he's like,
right,
kind of like kid, he's the black kid, right?
Right.
Because I forgot his name, and it's Joyce Byers. I'm sorry, it's Winona Ryder's character. But I think, it's fantasy, right? So yeah, it is fantasy. So in fantasy, you don't have to do it doesn't have to be a situation where it has to be like, oh, well, we're going to always remind you that he's black and that he's going to be treated as an other,
right?
Right. So it's not like it's like a hardcore drama about the South in the 60s. You know what I'm saying? So I like the fact that he's just able to be on the show, and that made the show better for me. And so I love the kids. I love the storyline of season 1. Season 2 was really good as well. And so let's get to season 3, because we've done this long preamble. So going into the season 3, I was worried, as I was worried about season 2. I honestly did not think season 2 was going to be as good as it was, because they really told a pretty complete story in season 1. So usually when you tell a complete story, there's not much to go to, right? And so that means you're just shoehorning stuff in there. Now, I heard from someone that they actually had a 4 to 5 season plan already. I don't know how true that is. So maybe that's why it's it is as good as it is. But I was when season 2 was good, I was so surprised, not because they didn't do great in the first season, just because it seemed like they had exhausted everything they needed to in the first season. And then, okay, so I'm like, okay, they got away with season 2. Now on season 3, yeah, where can we go with this? That's what I was like. Then when they got to season 3, and season 3 was even better than season 2, and it was so awesome of a season, I really had to just tip my cap to the Duffer Brothers. They really did an amazing job. And I don't know, what were you thinking going into season 3? Like, where did you have high expectations?
To be honest, I don't think that I had very high expectations at all. I was hoping that they would keep up somehow. But like you, I was also definitively surprised, and um, I think season 3 was better season 2 by miles and miles and miles.
Country Miles, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was such a complete it was such a complete epic. You could almost take season 3 of Stranger Things, and with a tiny bit of preamble at the beginning, you could make that a standalone season with everything that it needed. And that is sort of rare, because most seasons of any of any show really require really lengthy understandings of season 1 and season 2 or 3 or whatever in order to get back into stuff, and this just didn't require it. And again, it does make sense that they had a really long plan, or maybe even some kind of story diagram for 4 seasons going forward. But in some ways, the season 3, the overall arc of season 3 feels a little bit more like, okay, now we expect that there will be a next season because of the way that they left it off. So even that little snip at the very end after the credits, there's something that feels a lot more like, oh yeah, we're pretty sure that this is going to go on for next season. Whereas at the end of season 2, I felt like, okay, yeah, this was great, and I'm sure that people will want to see something, but I didn't even know if they would continue with it past season 2, because, like you said, where do you go? What's next?
Right. Um, I would have to say, I've heard some people say that the only bad episode was like the first one. I'm like, wait a minute, the first episode was out. That's what got me totally to believe in the new season.
Mm-hmm.
The first episode was outstanding.
It was.
And I was like, and it set the tone for the whole season. Like, the editing was, I mean, it wasn't like the editing was bad before, but the editing in this season was so good. The way that they got in and out of the storyline, the way that they, the music was awesome. The way that they, the whole production was on a higher level.
The thing is that unlike a lot of series, and of course this is special because it's Netflix. So there are some. We should point out that there are some caveats that kind of go along with that, and there's some special. You get some special consideration when you're shooting something this way, as opposed to shooting it as like a regular TV series. But that doesn't really excuse some of the other stuff. But it seems like in season 3, whatever core that they were working around has become very refined. And so there's an ease of transition, an ease of character arcs being explained, an ease of, and almost like a comfort level with the material that makes it so much more enjoyable to go through the whole story, because we never feel like we're called out by the technical aspects of it. I was even thinking, oh my gosh, we talked about there's a scene where they're in the car, and they're being followed, right? And there's no way to do that without CGI, clearly, but it didn't even matter. That CGI didn't feel like it was the most important thing of the scene. And so it wasn't sort of like, oh my gosh, we have to pay attention to the CGI because it's going to look terrible, or because this, or because that. It wasn't even the most important aspect of the scene. There's just something so really good at defining what needs to happen in every scene and how to pay attention to the important parts of it that make it enjoyable to watch. I'll give you another example. When after they have sort of dealt with a bunch of stuff, they're in. Well, actually, I won't jump ahead. I'll just say that from a scripting standpoint, everything felt like it had transitional ease. That was something that I really enjoyed a lot.
No, I agree. I definitely agree, and I agree with Stephanie in the chat room. The Starcourt Mall uh, was awesome. Like if you know you've been in malls, especially during the '80s, and it had that feel like,
Yep.
like 'cause, I mean, a lot of us we spent a lot of time in the mall. That was like the thing, right? And it had all the stores, right? Sam Goody, right? It really gave that feeling, and I love that as a storyline of the malls coming in and hurting the businesses along the town square. I love that because that was like a real thing that even to this day is an issue, like with Amazon and Walmart, and that kind of has that thing that's going on now. But and I love the sneaking in the movie theaters. I mean, I don't know if you did that, but when I was a kid, we used to sneak in movie theaters all the time. Do the whole open up the back and all that. Yeah. See, yeah. We used to be there all day watching movies and all of that. So it just gave that really good nostalgic feeling. And they set it up very early on in that first season, and it eased back into the story, and I thought that was pretty good. So, let's get into the storyline, and the story arc of season 3. And one thing is, this is always doing callbacks to tropes and stuff that from the '80s and whatnot. And one of the big things, I know you remember this, was a lot of younger people may not know this, but the Russians were like the boogeymen of the '80s, right? The Russians were the boogeymen of the '80s, the Cold War. So every movie during the '80s, it was something about the Russians, were the bad guys or whatnot. It was it was a lot of Russia, like the James Bond movies, all the different spy movies. It was always something with the Russians, and I love how this season really played up. Yeah, they still are, right? They
Yeah,
they
they
kind of
still are.
went away for a little bit, and then now, right, right, but during the '80s, it was kind of a different thing.
Well,
The
it,
the way that it
the
was,
thing is that in
it's
the 80s,
yeah,
in the 80s, it was actually a bit of a panic. It was a panic in the same way that I hear my uh, parents and my grandparents talk about like the Bay of Pigs. It was actually scary because a lot of people believed that the Russians had their fingers on the nukes, and at any moment that could be the end. Like tensions were so huge that, oh, okay, well, they've got control, so who knows what might happen. And one of the things that I love about Stranger Things is how they do all these shout outs of the all of the movies and all of the pop culture that sort of support their whatever it is that they're trying to say. So there's all of these little shout outs to things like war games, and there's shout outs to things that sort of were the typification of why people were so nervous and scared of the Russians.
the Terminator.
And yeah, great. That was totally great.
Okay. Uh, oh, that's right. D. We're gonna be talking about season 3 of Stranger Things. So if you haven't finished it, you're probably gonna get spoiled. So, uh, but anyway, but I love that the Terminator character, and it was pretty obvious in the beginning. And I love how they did the different Terminator aspects to it, and that was pretty cool. Um, so
So I'm totally going to betray how old I am right now, which may or may not be a good thing. But I mean, Stranger Things basically was my childhood, just a little bit before. But I mean, I could follow along with every single thing that was happening almost as if I were those kids. They would be like just a little bit older than I was, but not by much. And so, well, like I actually was trying to do the math about how old it would make everybody. And everything that they sort of go through in terms of what pop culture is at the time, I absolutely positively experienced. And so I do have a different kind of nostalgic bias towards Stranger Things, but I feel like so much of the 80s has become mainstream pop culture in sort of the, everything that's old is new again, that people really, really like that aspect to it without it even needing to be nostalgic. And I think the mall is one of them, because who goes to the mall anymore?
It's not quite like it was, but I mean, I guess I try to stay away from malls, to be honest with you. At this point, if I, it's almost like I have to go when I go. But it used to be you went. That's where I met the most girls. At we would go to the mall and try to see how many numbers we could get and all of that kind of stuff. So
we used to call people who went to the mall all the time mall rats. That they were just mall rats.
Which is the name of episode 2. But I gotta say, and it was a movie, Kevin Smith movie too.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
I have to say, in season 2, I did not like the character Billy. Did not like him at all. I don't think I cared for the overall character, right? The actor, I thought he was cool or whatever. He did a good job. But I was just kind of like whatever about him. And the way that they brought him and Max, it just kind of was like, I don't know about these characters. But it paid off in season 3.
It did.
And even though Billy's still an asshole, but he's a Invasion of the Body Snatcher asshole, for the most part during the season 2. But first of all, the actor Declan Montgomery, Deckard or whatever the hell his name is, I think it's Deckard or something. Wait, Deckard. He's Australian too. I've seen some interviews with him. Dude was really good. The guy can act pretty good, and I thought he really was great. They really gave him a great, his arc was awesome, and the way that and he killed it. He was just really good. And
I have to interject something and say that I actually liked, not that I liked who the character was in season 2, but I did really like Billy in season 2. Mostly because I understood that from a protagonist / antagonist role, there was a very careful line that they had to draw to make Billy not turn into something bigger than what was happening in the main in the main storyline. And they did that very deftly. That was a really good I think they did a really good job with it. But also because I recognize how difficult it really is to play the quote unquote villain in any story. It's not as easy as it seems. I feel like it could have easily been so over the top, and they did a really good job of pulling it back in to make it feel like it was super personal instead of something, something bigger than that. And then in season 3, the payoff, like you said, was that this very fully defined character who we already know he's slimy in all kinds of different ways. We're not exactly upset to see him go through his transformation and be the most terrible thing out there. But at the same time, think about how you feel at the very end with what happens to him and why that really matters. Why it matters to us that Billy dies at the end is sort of, I think, a really brilliant kind of writing trick, because by all rights, we shouldn't care at all. We shouldn't. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And they really hooked him up in that the third season. And now it kind of feels like it was a plan. Like, okay, we're going to bring them in now, and then it's going to really pay off. Because, now, but on the flip side, I know we're not going to agree on this one.
Uh-oh.
I didn't like Max. Max is annoying as hell to me.
Do you think she was written that way by design, though?
That's what I'm saying. I don't
Yeah.
like her character. Like every time she talks, the it makes my nose damn near bleed. I mean, she's
Aw.
annoying. That's an annoying character.
Well,
Uh,
I do think she was written to be annoying. I think that that is a thing. But I also think that her being annoying is also uh, an important part of the character matrix.
no, I mean I'm not saying. Look, she's a fine enough actress, so it's not that. And whether it's written to be that way or not, I just don't like it when she speaks. So like it's pretty annoying. So I just not a big fan of the Max character. I didn't and love her when they brought her in the last season, and unlike her big brother, who's a complete jerk, but I don't like his. I didn't like his character either, but I liked. What I mean is, I don't root for his character or anything like that, but I just liked what they did with his character. So even though his character is not likable, but it's the way it was handled was very well done. Not to say I just I'm
Well,
not in love with the Max character. I
Max
don't
was
wait.
way more relatable, though, in terms of, well, even, no, that's not true. I won't say that. I think Max was relatable in one way and Billy was relatable in another way. I've known tons of people like Billy over the course of my lifetime. And, sometimes you eye roll, sometimes you just push those people out of your life, and sometimes you sort of just have to deal with them. But the Max character was actually a little bit more interesting because I just personally feel like it takes somebody like Max to be a friend slash equal, forget the supernatural stuff, to be with, to basically be the counter, um, that she needed to be for 11. Because if 11 is so quirky on her own that I can't imagine anybody else pulling out of that mall would have been able to friend Max in that. I mean, I'm sorry, friend 11 that way, other than Max.
No, I mean I definitely agree with you. She served her purpose, and I'm not saying that she's a character that maybe shouldn't be on the show or nothing. I just she just is annoying to me. That's all.
I
But
get you.
but the actress is fine. And I guess she's a necessary evil on the show. And it really helped. Her presence obviously helps with Billy through the arc of the third season as well.
Definitely.
So you need her character, but I'm just saying I don't enjoy her character. Now let's go to Steve. Steve, although he was a douchebag in season one and to some degree in season two, not as much. Um, I never disliked Steve to the point where when he came on screen, I was just like, oh God, fast forward. You know what I mean? And to be honest with you, in season three, Steve is one of my favorite characters. Like,
Yeah.
they did a really great job of, and it felt natural, the more metamorphosis of Steve to become the character that he is. And I like
Right.
they addressed the whole him and Nancy Wheeler's past love, and like because like that he's not really gotten over it, but he's moved on. And I just really liked and think about I love this storyline because it's like how many guys or women especially guys who was the man in high school, like they're the man, they get
Yeah.
all the girls like them, they just run it, and then they have a hard time transitioning out of high school. Now they're not the man, you know not every girl falls on their feet when he walks into the room. They're like he looks goofy now, and that's kind of what happened with Steve. Is Steve was the man, and now he's like he works at the what's that place called?
Scoops.
Huh? Ahoy,
Yeah, Scoops.
Scoops Ahoy. Thank you. And he looks like a goofball the whole season, And I love it. I love it. I thought that was great. I'm drawing a blank on his coworker who was there through the whole season.
Robin.
Robin, literally Robin to his Batman, I guess. Um, you know, at first I didn't like her, like she was kind of annoying, and then as the season went along, you know, you start to like her, which was
Okay,
cool.
so a little bit of trivial fact about Robin, because I had to go find out who this character really was. She's actually the daughter of Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke. That's pretty amazing. She's got some pretty powerful parents there.
Yeah, I actually remember Ethan Hawke was doing an interview and he was gushing about his daughter's
Nice.
career, and then he mentioned on an interview that she got this big role, but he couldn't say what it was or something
I,
like that. So,
I love that. And actually, so this brings me to sort of one central point for me, which there is a pivotal scene between Robin and Steve. It happens. I even posted this all across my social media because I loved it so much. They are in the bathroom, and Steve has an aha moment about Robin. There is something that was so dynamic about that particular scene that it reminded me of why Stranger Things is so good. And it sort of all boils down to that crazy, unbelievable things are happening. Stranger Things never loses the focus of who is important. And it is always the characters and their relationships to each other. The elements of everything else, no matter how big they are never overshadowing the characters and their relationships. And that one scene was, in my mind, a kind of perfection, both in script writing and in editing. It was just, it was so dynamic that I can't even imagine anything sort of taking its place and being that perfect. I've seen so few scenes that rise to that level. And it's just that, to me, it just reminds me about why Stranger Things is so awesome altogether. I want to ask you one question, because this sort of goes back to an editing issue. So the one big complaint that I have heard from a lot of people, and I feel like they miss the point of the scene, is the place where Dusty is singing, and they sing the Never Ending Story. And I wanted to ask you, how did you feel about Dusty and Susie in that scene?
the great great
Did it
scenes of the
bother you?
show. No, it was one of the best scenes ever on the show.
I'm with you.
It
I am totally with you.
it was it was perfect actually, and because some people, you know, they were talking about it was hokey and stuff. That's the point. It was
Yep.
supposed to be hokey. That's what the
Yep.
show is. Like you haven't been paying attention. Like that scene was. I mean, you kind of saw it coming. I mean, not necessarily that particular. You knew that. I mean, you always knew from the beginning that somehow she was going to come in to play
Right.
very end. I figured it was always going to be at the very end, but the way that they did it, I thought was really cool. Uh, I don't know if she's up there with Phoebe. What's her name? Phoebe Cates. Uh, but
Oh yeah.
but no, but I thought that was awesome because you know Dustin is a singer, or the guy who
Yep.
plays Dustin
Yep.
is a singer, and he actually I think I saw something where he's releasing some singles that coming up soon. And he's a
Nice.
theater kid, so he done musical theater. So it was a good way to use a talent that he has, and it was a great scene, and and those moments are the moments for me that that will stick out, you know. And I thought it was great. I mean, I couldn't see how anybody wouldn't have liked that scene, especially, you know, I can see if we're talking about we're watching a show like if we're watching Breaking Bad and then somehow, you know, Walt just starts breaking out in the song, you know, like that would be kind of strange, right?
Well,
You know,
okay, so let me phrase the criticism, or let me couch the criticism the way that I understand people were sort of on about it, because I think that this is why for some people it is hard to enjoy Stranger Things. And I'll tell you sort of what I think at the end of it. But basically what they said across social media was that that particular scene lowered the Stranger Things story down to a kind of juvenile feel, that it, you know, it felt like a Barney sing along. I'm trying to remember some of the other ones, but they were just as sort of demeaning about how that presentation was created. But on the flip side of that, according to I think it was Spotify, I can't remember, a couple of platforms that where you request music, the Never Ending Story theme song has rocketed to a #1 request across those media streams, which tells you that people really are paying attention. The thing that I think that, or the reason that I think that people thought it was juvenile, is because they at, are not looking at Stranger Things a mechanism of storytelling using nostalgia as the base, as the core. They're looking at it with the grumpy old, you know, get off my lawn kind of feel. And you're never happy with Stranger Things if that's the case. It's always the one criticism that I have gotten, not that I've gotten, but that I keep reading over and over again about Stranger Things, is that it focuses too much on kids, and they're not relatable. And I, in my head, I'm always thinking, well, why are they not relatable? But I think it's because at a certain point, people decide that characters or children don't have the same quality to them as characters, that like they become unrelatable simply because don't find that to be enjoyable. But for the most part, nothing that any of the nothing any of the characters do as kids are not relatable to what we do as adults. Not one thing. Do you know what I mean?
About that. I have to mute because it's so hot. I got to turn on my fan every
Oh no.
time. So so please forgive me. I'm trying to be quicker with it so I won't be any lag. But and I don't know if you look when I had the fan going, it looked like my napkins back there were on fire. I don't know if you noticed that. I looked back, I was like, "What the hell is that, a fire?" And I look back, and it's just the way it looks, the glare or whatever. But
So Kinte, whenever you need to cool down, just let me know and I'll launch into a soliloquy.
oh, no, oh, hey, I might need a 3 hour soliloquy to be honest with you. Man, it's hot, you know. So but some people are just gonna dislike something. They're just looking for reasons to hate, and their default is that it sucks. And I just that is annoying to me when people's default. Look, I'm critical, as you know. I'm very critical, and but one thing I try not to be, critical in a way where my default is criticism. Like sometimes things are,
Try not to get
sometimes like just in like people are not. It's like someone who goes to a comedy club not to laugh. You know what I mean? It's like you ever see that where they just go in there like I'm going. None of these motherfuckers are gonna be funny. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing.
Well, right, but what's so strange is for people to wait until season 3 to say, "Oh, this is just too juvenile," because I mean, this was actually the most grown-up season that we've had so far. So far, season 1 dealt with basically a Dungeons and Dragons campaign. Season 2 expanded on that with a lot of supernatural other it's stuff with like you said, the big conspiracy things happening. And then season 3 is basically about the evolution of what it is to be a kid and grow up or grow into your evolving roles in life and how to deal with that. And it's so crazy to me that what they find to criticize it, in especially in season 3, wasn't vocal in season 1 or season 2. I just found that to be silliness. Just like you said, it was just people complaining to complain.
Yeah. So, but you know what? Screw those people. I thought the season was awesome. let's
You
talk.
know, I wanted.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
Well,
no,
I
go
was
ahead.
going to ask about. I was going to ask about how. Okay, so I really I know that we want, and so do I, because that's another thing that I heard a lot of criticism about. I heard a lot of criticism about Hopper and how Joyce reacts to him. But I really want to first, before we get into that, I really wanted to get your take on what did you think about Murray and about Alexei. I really want to know what
You mean
you
Smirnoff?
took away from that. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Smirnoff. No, not Alexei was the bad guy. He was the big guy, the guy that wouldn't die, the Terminator.
Oh, okay. Um, okay, so let's start off with Smirnoff.
Smirnoff.
Smirnoff, at first, he was just, you know, scientist character, not really, thinking much about him. And as it went on, like you really started liking the guy. Like, you know what I mean? Even though he really didn't talk much, the guy was a really good actor because he's acting. First of all, he's acting without speaking too much.
Right.
The way that he would emote and the way that he actually they got this really great performance out of the guy, where you actually started to like him, and I love the Slurpee, you know, where he wanted he they gave him a strawberry Slurpee and he's like only will drink cherry. And then he's like, no, he's gonna drink that one. And then it turned out, I like strawberry too. Like I love that. I thought that was really good. Um, to the point when his spoiler alert, when his character died, I actually felt it was like a Bob moment almost. Not quite to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I was like, oh, they killed Smirnoff. Like, I was like, I actually felt bad for Smirnoff when he got killed. And then when Murray, has that moment where he realizes that he's been shot, and because remember, they start out at odds because you brought that commie into my home.
That's right.
And he was, sad when he eventually were to die. I thought that was just I thought it was really good. I enjoyed it because could have been a real nothing character, and he did a great job with it. Murray, I enjoyed Murray a lot. I thought Murray was funny. I really enjoyed how they used him in there. I thought they were just going to use him for just a pop up. He just happened to speak Russian, and then that was going to be it. And then and they would leave and go back. I enjoyed how they pulled him through the whole thing. He was funny. The guy was very funny. I liked him better in season 3 than even season 2, and he was good in season 2. And that was a character that I just assumed you would never see from. I was shocked when he pulled back up. That they're going to use these characters, which I love. You establish these characters, use them, right? So
Right.
I enjoyed Murray quite a bit. He was hilarious, and one thing he did was he broke up the tension between Hopper and Joyce, which I thought was cool, because they're going at each other. They're dealing with unrequited love. So, and then I love it when he just called a thing and point out what was going on.
Murray is the quintessential character translator, and I don't just mean from English to Russian. He actually sees into the situation and then calls it like it is, and that is it's rare for that to sort of work without that character seeming like they are just like they're just
an exposition.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And instead, it really comes off as being very authentic. Some of those moments were just especially in the car. That one scene in the car just crushed it. I really loved that. And also, his name was Alexei. That was I did remember it right.
No, I know you remembered it right, but remember they kept referring to him as Smirnoff.
They did, yes,
right.
yes.
So that was just a joke. You were saying it properly.
The Terminator guy was the other one. They didn't refer to him by name too often, but that was the big I don't know what to call him. The Terminator character.
Big ass Russian dude.
Yeah, the big Russian dude.
I like how you censored my translation. That's pretty cool. And we're gonna get to about what we think about what happened with Hopper. I see it in the chat room. But I just wanted to get to a couple of things, and then we'll get into that. Um, let's talk about 11, and then we're gonna circle back to Hopper and actually, can we close with Joyce and Hopper's arc and what ultimately happened? Like that'll be one of the last things we'll do, and then
Okay.
I want to talk about 11. Um, I'm not 11 was had an okay season, I thought. Even though I love her character, I love that actress, she's amazing. Um, but I mean, I like the relationship between her and Mike. Even though if I was Hopper, I'd have beat the crap out of both of them. The way they were disrespecting him, in the beginning, I'd have, yeah, she wouldn't. I would have used. She wouldn't have been able to use them powers on me the way I'd have got them. But
They're kids.
but to be look, the way I was raised,
Oh gosh.
the way I was raised, okay, I would have never thought to disrespect my mama like that. You know what I'm saying? I would have never. He's afraid of losing her like his daughter. I understand. Yeah, that's why he don't go too hard. But I would have like. There's no way in hell I would have disrespect my mother or my father like that. You know what I mean? I wouldn't even be here right now. You'd be talking to a ghost. So like, you know what I mean? Like that's like
That
something.
would make a really interesting podcast, by the way.
Like cursing at my parents? Are you kidding me? I'm fully grown and I wouldn't do that now. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm scared now. Okay.
It's a delicate line. It's a delicate line. And I think a lot of people will recognize that that by doing that, it Hopper's real inexperience at being a parent,
Right.
that they disrespect. Well, the disrespect, I don't think it wasn't over the line, but it was testing. They were testing.
It was way over the line.
Hey, what's okay? What's that?
It was way over the line.
Well, you're right, but testing the boundaries and going over the line is part of. I'm a mom of 3, so I kind of know this stuff. But this is what happens, and you get a number of different options about how you choose to respond. And sometimes it's what Hopper did, and sometimes it's something completely different. I think that they actually did a lot of some character development with Hopper by making him seem so unsure do in that. And I mean, the fact that he addresses Mike instead of addressing 11 directly, everything that happened in that particular piece was actually really.
No, it was very well done. I do agree. I'm just saying it makes me cringy because of how I was raised. Like I was a kid in the 80s. Remember that. And I would have not been an adult in the 90s if I acted like that. I'm just saying, all right? All right, my mama and my daddy would have killed me. I'm just saying, that's me. But I get it, because in the chat room it says she doesn't really have the sense of boundaries like normal kids who have been raised normally. I understand that. I'm just saying it just made me cringe. It's as someone who would have, I mean, don't get me wrong, I wasn't a saint, but I wasn't an asshole. So I had to wait till I became an adult to be a bona fide adult. But no, but I thought it was great though, those scenes, because it really established, yeah, see, she said her daddy would have vaporized it, right? So so you know what I'm talking about. But I really enjoyed that though, because it really fit what was, what are they, about 13 now, something like that ish, 13ish.
Yeah, 13, 14, somewhere in that range.
Right. So it really fit like these kids who are, getting older and being mature and making out and all of that kind of stuff. So like like I never could have a girl in my bedroom at that age. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that was not happening. you know, like, and she would have had to sneak through the window, or I'd have sneak through her window or something like that, you know. But I love though, you know, but it's a special situation, right? Because of what's going on and all of that, and she's not really supposed to be out in the public and all of that kind of stuff. So I really enjoy, you know, because he really loves her, and she's kind of like the, I don't want to say replacement daughter for the one he lost, but I mean, you know, like it's almost like his opportunity to do it again, you know.
Well, right, and I think it and actually for Hopper, I think it has less to do. 11 has less to do with sort of being the replacement or the stand-in, and more like a second chance. And to me, when I see it through that kind of lens, it makes me actually feel even more heartbroken for Hopper. There's something quintessentially that I think we're missing with the Hopper 11 sort of feeling, and that is this was an accidental situation. I don't think that Hopper set out to become a quote unquote dad. He fell into this role because he is the person that he is. And in that way, there is something very authentic in the relationship that grew out of that. And in season 2, that's basically what we see. And in that final letter that, is said, that she reads from him, where he says, he really misses nostalgically the times when they made their Ego creation. It speaks to a kind of there's a renewal that it was going on there that I feel like was healthy for both of them. And then as she started to grow, he wasn't ready to let go. That's really super typical of a lot of parents. But I feel like it was even more profound here because his second chance. And I sort of feel like maybe he thought that he was blowing it. And maybe that's why he even let Mike stay there, because he felt like, oh, okay, well, if I don't, then just that I might lose her love, maybe. Well, I don't know if that's actually the right word, but maybe I won't be able to communicate this properly. But also because maybe he was trying to sort of make up for something that he felt that didn't happen the last time that he was in this kind of situation. I don't know, just seems like it's way more complex than just one little thing on the surface. And I also feel like we kind of get to that when Joyce and Hopper are talking drugstore, and she's kind of giving him parent cliff notes about how to approach the situation. It to a complexity with Hopper.
Yeah, how do you feel about the Enzo scene? He bought that. First of all, I know you were turned on by that shirt he had. Did he press that special bought for his date that he was supposed to have had at Enzo, which sounds like just a charming restaurant.
That was the sweetest thing ever.
Right. So, how did you feel for him when she didn't show up and all of that?
Well, it's funny. Okay, so I'm gonna give you kind of my Hopper 411 about especially in this season. In some ways, I never actually really feel very bad for Hopper, because I feel like he's such a product of his own making. He does stuff, and then that is basically he reaps what he sows. But there's also a part of Hopper which feels as innocent isn't the right word, but maybe naive is a better word, in the sense that he is always so ready to put himself out there, and is always so surprised about feeling let down and sad when it doesn't turn out the way that he wants it to. And it's so endearing. It's I don't know, there's something so special about that reaction that he has when she doesn't show up, that's like, it's so the fact that he can't let it go speaks to how high his expectations were of that situation. I mean, I think so.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I felt bad for him, and and remember, she had just dealt with losing Bob, And
That's right.
I feel nothing. Hilarious. Um, so
Well,
you
she had just lost Bob, but I think more than that, I mean, I'm not, I'm not defending sort of the the Joyce has a big. There's a lot of conundrums about Joyce, but one of the things that I think happens is Joyce has been through 3 seasons of just nothing but trauma, constant trauma, uh, especially obviously with her kid. But more than that, I think, she has to have her own kind of come to reckoning moments about what's happening in her own life and whether she's really in charge of it. And when she says, when she when she basically chooses to figure this other stuff out and she doesn't show up at the restaurant, it feels to me like it's not just that she's taking charge of her life, but maybe that for the first time she's actually thinking differently than she has been thinking in the past. And I know it let Hopper down, and I feel very bad for Hopper, but I also feel like in that moment it was sort of Joyce being empowered, and it's hard for me to fault her about that.
I know we said that we were going to save them for last, but no, no, you make great points there. Um, okay, so we'll circle back. I want to really get into the we're going to get into the kids, but before we do that, let's talk about Nancy Wheeler and and Jonathan Byers, working at the Hawkins newspaper. First of all, when I saw Jake Busey, I was like, oh, I was, like, I think Jake Busey he's a good actor for what he does, and I really enjoyed him. I was thinking maybe he would have a bigger role in on the show, but I thought it was pretty cool. Uh, those First of all, for such a small town, that newspaper has a huge staff. It's quite a bit of people that work at the Hawkins newspaper, and apparently they have a very fine collection of douchebags that work at the Hawkins newspaper. Like, I think
They're,
when
that's for sure.
everybody was a jerk, and Nancy Drew. They kept calling her Nancy Drew and all that, and I really enjoyed that aspect of the show, and I'm glad that it didn't last. I think it was perfect to have in the beginning, and then it kind of went away, and it went away especially when they got killed off, in the hospital, and I thought it definitely served its purpose. Uh, how do you feel about Nancy and Jonathan and their relationship?
You had your you've got your this particular situation really annoyed me, and it didn't annoy me because it annoyed me for reasons that I felt like it was so annoying to see Nancy uh, dissed. That was, oh God, that really drove me crazy. But it also sort of, the two of them together seemed simultaneously ready to take on the world and incredibly short-sighted at every moment. It just, I don't know, there was something about that relationship that drove me absolutely up the wall. I can't describe exactly what it was, other than there was something that felt like it was missing out of that relationship, right? Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And I would say that although like those guys were definitely misogynists and assholes, but I can understand why they would be slow to want to take what she has to say with any merit, because she was she'd barely been there, and it wasn't like she was like you have to get to a certain point where people start really taking you serious.
Right, but there was
And if you
meaningful glee. There was a meaningful glee to the way that they
oh, no
dismissed
doubt, no
her.
doubt, no doubt. But I can understand why they wouldn't take her serious too, though. Because I mean, think about the story she was pitching. It sounds crazy as hell, you know.
Right.
But but of course it was it was extra on there because they were complete dickheads. And Jonathan, sometimes you like Jonathan's, and most times to me he is a little annoying too. Do you believe though that they're a couple? Like, is it believable to you that they would fall for each other?
I mean, sort of it does, in the same way that like Stockholm syndrome is kind of a thing. Like it sort of feels like, okay, yeah, they're put together, they're going through some crazy experiences, and sometimes those situations definitely pull people together in ways that you wouldn't expect. On the other hand, there is a I don't know, that I think maybe that's what it was. There's such a strange chemistry between the two of them that doesn't quite make me feel like it matters. Like, I think they care about each other, but I feel like they care about each other almost like brother and sister, instead of each other uh like anything else. They feel like they are more how did you say it in the beginning, like a Batman and Robin. There's the lead, and then there's kind of like the partner, and you guys support each other, and you really care about each other, and you're willing to go to all kinds of distances in order to make stuff work. But at the same time, there isn't really anything underneath that's heavy uh romantic, I guess. I mean, the feelings just seem like they shouldn't. I don't know, they're just no. The answer is no. I don't feel like
He's
they
no
should.
Steve. He's no Steve.
Huh?
He's no Steve.
He's no Steve.
He's kind of like the fantasy.
Yeah,
He's the nerd fantasy, like the girl, like she would be Steve is no Steve, hilarious. Like, like the girl would choose the nerdy creepy guy over the guy that everybody wants, that kind of thing. It's kind of a fantasy trope, I think. Like,
maybe.
yeah.
Although I will say that Jonathan actually lent a lot to the actual plot development. I mean, I think having Jonathan be a character in his own right, it's not like I thought in season 3 he was diminished in any way, but it felt like his role was really to sort of prop Nancy up instead of him going out and doing his own thing. It wasn't, I think, until the mall at I'm sorry, well, there's the mall was a lot, but it wasn't until the end, when they're in the mall and they have to get the part for the car, that I realized how sort of forthright that really was. It really was Nancy kind of standing on her own, and Jonathan being sort of the support character for her, instead of Jonathan being sort of having his own a plot line himself, right?
In the chat room, she says she can see a future with Jonathan, and Nancy's super driven versus Steve working at an ice cream stand and couldn't even do his homework in school. But you know what, though, I would say, Stephanie, although Jonathan might be going somewhere, but Steve could get her free ice cream in perpetuity. So you can't. Come on now, free ice cream. I'm just saying.
Well, okay, actually, it would have to be free video rentals, which at this point is
well. I mean, during the ice cream stand era of his life, she could have had free ice cream. Now it's free rental. Look, rental, like she can rent whatever movie she wants now. So. Okay, so let's get into because before we go, we've been going at it for a while. But you can see the paired Steve with the girl he never even noticed in school. Same dynamic, right? Right, you're right, 100%.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's that fantasy crap. Uh, all right, so let's get into the storyline because we don't want to be here forever. Um, what do you think about the
Well,
villain?
speak for yourself. I'm super excited to be here forever.
Oh,
I'm
okay,
good.
okay. What do you
Yeah.
think about the villain in this season, the Mind Flayer, and the storyline? And was it clear? Was it very clear to you what was going on throughout the season? And did you understand, what the Mind Flayer was trying to accomplish? And ultimately, did you? Because I there was a lot of talk that people were a little confused to the plot line of and exactly what the villain in this season was, besides the obviously the Russians, but I mean the Mind Flayer.
Right.
Yeah, and
Well,
confused with the rats too. Yeah,
yeah, if you so if you're a super nerd and you approach this like it's a Dungeons and Dragons campaign and you go back and you sort of look at what the Mind Flayer is, then it kind of makes some sense. But I personally can understand why people were confused by what was supposed to be happening. Like it always been an aha moment where we understood what the I'm going to use this word in quotes, but what the motive of the Mind Flayer really was. Unfortunately, it wasn't, I don't think, conveyed as well as it should have been because they allow for a lot of the actions to speak for what the intention. I do think that, and this is one of the of having such awesome characters, is that we were paying attention so much to the characters and all of their awesome arcs that some of the pieces to the story, some of the pieces to the narrative that needed to kind of fall into place were kind of falling by the wayside altogether. I mean, at one point, my one of my observations was it felt like they were trying to push too many supernatural pieces together in too short of a time. And because they did it the way that they did it, nothing ever felt like it was going to come to fruition. So, I mean, we had sort of the portal. We had, okay, well, what's going to happen when they open the rift? And that, of course, is very supernatural in and of itself. And then we have Eleven's powers, which are also very supernatural. Then we have the Mind Flayer, which is also very supernatural. And then we have the Billy dynamic that fits into the Mind Flayer. And none of that sort of felt like it was all lining up together. It's not, it did work. I mean, by the end, it did make sense. But I think throughout the season, in individual episodic pieces, I think it did feel a little bit disconnected. Did you feel that way?
and usually when you feel like that, you're like, oh, this is just a big jumble mess. But it was so well done that even though I was kind of confused at points, and I'm pretty bright, and I did have
We
there were some times I'm like, okay, what's going on? Like, who's this? And who's that? It started to connect when Nancy went to the hospital to check on the old lady, and that stuff was pretty. That
Right.
first of all, that was creepy as hell. By the way, that was
That was
yeah,
good.
that was real creepy. But like I said, I'm pretty swift, and I was a little confused. I was like, what's going on here? But then and the rats, in the beginning, which anyone who knows me knows that I hate rats. I don't like Ratatouille. Okay, I wouldn't watch that. So, that's not one of my favorite things in the world. So but so it was a little confusing what was going on. So but you know what? I was enjoying the ride. So I was enjoying the ride. So therefore I didn't I just let it come to me, and by the end I got what was going on. But it was a little, the whole Mind Flayer thing, because there was a part where Will kind of explains the whole thing with the Mind Flayer and all of that. And
Right.
Yeah, that was supposed to be us getting the information, you know?
Well, and see, and if you've ever say, God, see, I really am actually a kid of the '80s. If you've ever actually played Dungeons and Dragons,
I've never played.
um, well, see that you'll have to come over so we can do a grown-up session of Dungeons and Dragons. Totally awesome. Um, the there's a lot of stuff about the Mind Flayer. Well, it's not. The thing is that that's kind of a misnomer. Mind Flayers are not. They're they're like a, what's the word I'm looking for? Mind Flayers are a sort of a not a species, but like a different kind of race altogether. And part of the reason that the Mind Flayer worked in this particular episode is because the again, going back to sort of what you know about sort of the underlying lore, Mind Flayers are always lawful evil. And so in an alignment chart, lawful evil means that they have to adhere by certain codes and standards, even though they always work toward the evil side, the side that is not aligned with good. And but they still follow a very rigid code, and that really came out. I mean, somebody did their homework. It really came out in the way that the Mind Flayer worked through all of the other characters. It definitely didn't do things it wasn't supposed to. It didn't take shortcuts that I feel like anybody else could have taken. And just from a the standpoint of sort of what its intent was, that's where it gets a little nebulous, because although there's some explanation from Will about what this actually means, there isn't sort of the overarching, oh, okay, well, this is easy to understand why it's here and what it's doing, because it's so mixed up with a lot of other stuff, and this idea that it's stuck on this side makes you have to really pull back into, well, what does it mean to be stuck on this side, and how does that even work? Why would that even be? And especially in light of what happened in season 2, right? Does that make sense so far?
You know what? Now that you explain kind of what the Mind Flayer is, I feel like I've dated some Mind Flayers over the years.
Oh gosh, I'm really sorry. I hope their tentacles didn't get in the way.
You know what? That was the best part of the relationship was their tentacles, but
Oh wow.
we won't go into that because it's supposed to be show PG. But yeah, totally.
It's also Mind Flayers are also, I think, in the Dungeons and Dragons lore, they're one of the few types, they're one of the few archetypes that could work, I think, against 11, and that's one of the reasons that it actually worked here, because they have this incredible psionic power, and the psionic power is sort of an equal to 11, and that feels like, okay, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to be, because everything else against 11 would have probably not stood a chance. So if they're going to keep up with the same Dungeons and Dragons lore, they have to come up with something that actually has the ability to do all of those things, like uh, some amounts of clairvoyance, some amounts of psionic, the ability to command things to its attention, all that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Is it to me? Does it seem like her powers? I know in the end she lost her powers, but um, the way that she was able to, use her, it seemed like her powers were elevated this season. Like, maybe I need to rewatch the first 2 seasons, but it seemed like she could do a lot more with her powers, you know. Um, or I don't want to say a lot more because these are things that they already established that she can do, but it seemed a little more powerful this season. Does that seem like that to you?
Well, I don't know if she seemed more powerful or if it just seemed like, as with most things in the character arcs, that she's much more comfortable using the powers. And so it feels not just effortless, but then also like she's got a greater command of them. I feel like that's just an ease. That's her ease. That's her growing into the fact that she's got these powers and can use them more readily on command, but they don't seem any greater than they were before. It's just a little bit less effortless.
If I want to date a woman with telekinesis,
Definitely a commitment, isn't it?
yeah, that's a like. I don't know if I want a woman that can throw me across the room with her mind. Like, I don't know, man. And if I don't take out the trash, she's gonna lift me up and make me take out the trash.
Well, on the positive side, on the positive side, if you date someone with telekinesis, they can take out the trash without ever touching it. So.
You know what? You're right. I'm like, why you want me to take out the trash? You got use your powers.
I just gave you a perfect argument. There you
go. Right. You're right. See, I like you. You know what's you definitely know what's up. And then she in the chat room, they says there might be some good sex. You know what? You can use your telekinesis to handle it. Like, let's say it's you don't feel like it that night. She can use her telekinesis to take care of her man. So there's a lot of reasons.
Oh my God, that's awful.
I always thought like that's how Yoda, Yoda probably did that, right? With his Jedi powers. Right? I think he used it. I think he told the other Jedis to not, because they took a vow of celibacy, but they never said Yoda did. So I think he was out there in them streets. But that's just what I think.
I would like to never think about Yoda and sex in the same sort of visual proximity ever.
Little Green Man wanted to.
Nope.
Little Green, he wasn't always 1,000 years old. Okay, he was 20 at some point.
Always green though. Yeah, no.
Right. Well, the green people need love. All my green. You know what? We might have green people watching, and they're now offended by your statements. So, but no, but there is, it's interesting too. There's this dynamic with Mike and 11 where he tries to be like the man in the relationship, but where he's trying to assert himself in that way. And Max comes in to kind of thwart it to a certain degree. And, she totally needs to butt out of their business. But he really cares for her, right? And there was a couple of times where, she was blocking. Like, yeah, like a good homegirl. No, a good homegirl don't do that. I really feel like he was looking out for her, and when he was saying, "Hey, maybe we shouldn't use her powers like this," because he's thinking of the negative effects that it could happen to her. I didn't, they were trying to make it like he was being sexist or something because he was trying to look out for his woman and her well-being. And I thought that was kind of messed up. That Max was the one that was pushing that.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't think that's okay. So I know that that's what was said. And I don't think that that's actually what they were saying. What was being said was 11 is a person in her own right and can handle herself. And I think that this is, again, this goes back to what I said earlier, which is season 3 feels like the characters are they evolved a lot over this season. They grew up in a way that is a big giant jump from where we were in season 2. And this is part of it. People have sheltered 11 her whole life in a way that was detrimental. And the only way that Max can deal with the only way Max knows how to deal with it is to say to 11 that, you can't let him control you. I don't think that it is really a situation of Max thinks that, well, no, maybe she does. I don't know. Maybe Max's experience says this is what this is what guys do. This is what men do. Some kind of
feminist type thing. And my thing is, butt out. This is between him and his girl. And he was right. He was actually right. Yeah, she's seen domestic violence. That's true. But he wasn't doing that. to I mean, it
Right.
makes sense from a character
But
point of
you're
view.
but you're not a teenage girl. And this is exactly what
No, I
teenage girls do.
agree.
This
I
is how you
agree.
define.
No, I'm not
Okay.
saying it's not in line with the character. I'm just saying that's just me looking at it, going, "Butt out, woman." You know,
Yeah, in the end, it does seem like Max may have made things just a little bit worse for everybody by, by basically inserting herself into a situation that didn't really require her to be
right,
there.
right. I mean, he was looking out for his woman. He better look. Mike was better than me because I would have shut that down with Max. I'm like, you don't get your rusty, dusty butt away from me and my situation. you know. So he was too nice. He was too nice. I thought, he should have shut that down. But he's young though. He don't know the game yet.
And also the way that they portray Mike is he's he's so innocent isn't the right word, but he there is some, it's not just naivete, there is something very provincial about Mike, something that just sort of he just is, he's a kid. I mean, more than anybody, actually almost more than Will, Mike seems like he is such a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because Will seems like, he's got some battle scars and, but Mike still, and that's why it's actually kind of nice that at the end he is able to let go. He's able to say, okay, I know this is going to end up being okay. We're going to do Thanksgiving. We're going to do Christmas. Like, we're going to make this work. And it felt like such a grown up sort of thing to be expressing. And it almost feels like, wow, he really did a lot of growing up over this season, because I don't think he would have been in that position at the beginning of the season.
No, it's hard, man. It's hard, and you want to be around your lady, so I ain't mad at him. I really, like I said, I really like the arc of their relationship in this season because, like it says in the chat room, teenage relationships are messy, and 1 minute we love each other, and next minute it's like, get away from me, and yeah, she has no mother figure. Yeah, maybe Joyce can show her that.
All that stuff is all totally true, and actually, if you think about it, that's actually sort of a brilliant it's a brilliant stroke of writing for them to sort of leave the season with 11 had now had Hopper for a while, and he gave her the kind of parental influence that only a dad could give you. And now we leave with Joyce, who it's very possible can impart the kind of wisdom that only a mother figure could leave you with. So it kind of makes 11 feel like there is a chance for her to be far more okay than she would have been without. I mean, not that, losing Hopper is obviously that's.
All right, let's get to it. Let's get to the nitty gritty. Is Hopper dead?
Well, if you believe the end credits, maybe not. Also, if you believe the fact that he just signed the contract again, maybe
did
not
he?
either. Yeah.
Oh, so Hopper. Well, shoot.
So I mean, in the real world, it seems unlikely. In the fictional world, it feels pretty complete that, yeah, he's got to be dead.
Oh, well, you said he didn't sign the contract.
He did. He did. The guy who plays
David
Hopper
Harbour
signed he signed a fourth contract with basically with Netflix to do the next season. So.
Oh, okay. So he's not going to be like a Force Ghost. So.
I would highly doubt it.
Okay, so he's going to be in the next season for sure, one way or the other.
The question is, how does that work? If he's the American, when they say no, not the American, if that's him, then how did it work that they pulled him from one side of the world to the other without? How does that even work? That's a good. I feel like that's not just a big question; it's a giant sort of. It's a huge.
Well, question. They didn't show him die, so that usually means he's not dead.
Movie logic is a little bit tough.
So, how would you feel if he's not dead?
I feel like they better come up with some really solid reason that he's not, because we all saw that room totally explode.
And he had that little "I'm about to die" look on his face.
Yeah, and the only thing that we came up with as a collective group, and there were only three of us, so it's a small sample, is maybe the force of the blast opened the rift enough that something happened that connected the American side to the Russian side, and it basically forced them both out, and so now they're actually both alive.
Well, I don't know. I hopefully I don't want his character to be dead. He's one of my favorite characters on the show, and so I'm pretty sure he's going to be alive. I didn't even when they said he was going to die. They said it might be Matthew Modine, huh? Which I really enjoyed Matthew Modine in the first season. Uh, but Stephanie actually sent me this article of 8 questions we have about season 4. Let me make sure I said that. 8 questions we have about to yet be announced, but inevitable Stranger Things season 4. It says what year it'll be. More likely, they're suspecting it'll be 1986, which was a really good year.
Hmm.
86. What's the deal with Hopper and the Russians? Is another question. Will 11 get her powers back? How did the departure of the Byers family change everyone? Question 5 is, can Stranger Things expand its world building beyond Hawkins? Which it seems like that's what they're attempting to do now, right?
Well, it has to. I mean, I don't think they have a choice. It's got to go beyond
Will
Hawkins.
Nancy get her big break, or at least I'm sorry. Will Nancy get her big break, or at least a break? What's going on with Will? Uh, well, they brought up his potential sexuality.
Mm-hmm.
It said that he didn't like girls, and I saw something where they were talking about they may explore him being homosexual, and how much more Robin will we get as well? And we know that her character did come out the closet during the season, which was an interesting scene in itself. So, of those questions I just mentioned, out of all of those, which one would you say is the one that you want to know more about? Well, obviously Hopper. So let's
Yeah.
take Hopper out. Those other questions.
Um. I mean, I already know that 11 will get her powers back, but in what capacity is sort of a little bit mysterious to me, and what that might mean. It's actually kind of interesting the way that they're doing this, because from a trope standpoint, typically the trope is that you get some kind of weird power or weird magnetism to things that are supernatural as you go through your teenage years. It's like that's why we always have so many stories about ghosts and demons and stuff like that that are attracted to especially younger women. And so that piece of the trope is sort of interesting because they're basically turning it upside down
Mm-hmm.
and creating a situation where 11 is losing her powers uh, to go through the transition of puberty all the way up into whatever. And that in and of itself sort of is kind of an interesting take on what it means to transition, in from being young, so into being a young adult, I guess is what I'm saying. Um, so I mean that one isn't quite so fascinating, but I think though I actually, I think honestly, what is sort of interesting to me is not whether Will is whatever his sexual orientation is, but I do feel like Will was. We didn't really see a lot of Will this season, and what we did see with him was sort of just okay. My spidey senses are tingling, and I I suspect that there's more to that, and I am very interested to see how they will sort of move Will's storyline going forward. I will say one other thing based on what we just talked about, which is, what we're expecting to see in season 4. In season 3, the the emphasis in season 1 and season 2 has always been on predominantly, other than 11, the male characters of Stranger Things. And by design, I mean, other than Joyce, by design, that it was a very integral and smart choice on their part. In season 3, however, I was very, very happy to see that there was a concerted emphasis on not just the women characters, but the power of women together, without making it seem ridiculous, without calling attention to it in a way that was, like filling it with hyperbole, or making it, such a huge metaphor that's beating you over the head with it. Instead, it just felt very organic, and I really, really appreciated that. Girl power is obviously very near and dear to my heart, but I never want it to be done sort of at the expense of the male characters. And in this case, it didn't feel like that's what happened. So I really liked that.
Wait a minute, the show is full of girl power. Literally, the main girl has power.
That's what I just said. I said 11 and Joyce being notable. That obviously that is a piece. But in this, but 11 and Joyce didn't. Their levels of involvement in the story and the actual figuring stuff out and making things work, although it was integral, it wasn't the same as it was in season 3. In season 3, they become sort of the core. Not just 11 and Joyce, but all the female characters become the core around which the male characters coalesce. And I think that going into season 4, I would hope, and I think it will actually happen, there will be a balanced approach. So we've had a lot of the male characters. Now we've had a whole season of really strong female characters. And I think in season 4, it will be a little bit more of a balance. But I just have to say that I just really enjoyed that. I felt like it was really good.
It. I hate girl power.
You do not.
More, they need to be more in the kitchen. No, I'm just playing.
Get out. I don't believe that for a second.
No, that's interesting. Do you think the Upside Down turned Will Byers gay?
No. What? Turned Will Byers gay.
I think that's what happened. He was in the Upside Down too long, and that's what it does. So.
I actually wouldn't even be surprised if, and also,
literally upside down.
For a preteen, exploring sexuality feels like it just seems like, yeah. Okay, so that's what Mike says, but I feel like we may have read too much into that, as he's just too young and he's just not interested in girls.
That's how I took it at first.
Yeah,
I started seeing articles.
I feel like maybe people read a little bit too much into it.
Well, I mean, the only reason I didn't take it as he was gay, I took it as he just hadn't got to that point yet. And then I started reading articles where they were talking about, oh, they're going to explore his homosexuality in the next season. And I'm like, yeah, he's emotionally stunted. Yeah. And he seemed like he was like that before the Upside Down too. And he's like kind of a small kid, and he's not, I mean, it's not like the other guys are cool, but I mean, they're not as stunted in a way. He's a late bloomer, right?
Yeah, he's a late bloomer. That's a perfect
right. And we got to get to this. And me and Steph actually talked about this yesterday. Is she really wants to know about the kids 1 through 10? And remember, in the second season, they did that episode where they kind of focused on it, which, actually, I was not a fan of that episode. But after having a conversation with Stephanie, it made me think about it a little bit. Like, I guess that episode was very necessary because they did set that up as there were other kids. And it really, they did need to pay that off.
Right.
So I think maybe if it happened maybe earlier in the season, because it came like in the middle of like a great arc that was coming, you know what I'm saying? And it kind of broke up that momentum. And I think, what I would have liked is, what I might have liked this episode a little bit more, that episode where 11 goes, off. You know what they could have done with it is she went away. They don't really tell what happened, and then she comes back, and then they could have waited like in between the season, and then actually made that as like a side movie, like some extra content of this is what happened while she was gone away or something, to kind of get you to bridge that time in between seasons. That I then you know what I'm saying? Like I would have actually liked that a little bit better, than that, because that episode, I think maybe if I rewatched that episode, I liked it better. It was just because it had got so far off what was going on, and I was so invested in it, and I understood what they were doing. It's kind of like a break before the crescendo, but I would have liked that as like a little mid-season movie, or I mean, in between season movie of this is what happened when, when 11 went away. You could have just said like she went away, she had some kind of experience, and then we'd have filled in the missing pieces of with that. They could have expanded that episode to like an hour and a half episode, and then that would have been like 11. So, but anyway, but maybe I need to rewatch that episode because I think I was so at the time just into it, and then it went to this other episode, and it was like, no, get back to the dogs, like
Right.
so, but, and then it was so awesome after that. But yeah, obviously, I think because they were talking about that was possibly a kind of a test pilot for a possible spinoff. And they were also, then they made a movie. I'm trying to remember what the name of that movie is. They made a movie that came out last summer that was the same plot of that episode about these kids who have these powers, and it was made by the same producers as well. Oh. And I can't remember what the name of the movie. The movie was like a big flop. It was like a big flop, and I never seen that movie. But it was like the same exact pilot, and at the end they said, "Oh, from the producers of Stranger Things." I was like, "Dang, that's that episode, basically."
Oh wow.
I need to look it up.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah, it was. It was. It was literally the same plot of that one episode with 11, where she went to Chicago and got with those other people with powers. It was literally that was what that movie was about. So see, it's gonna make me look it up. Because I've been saying that movie because I don't even remember the name of it.
Well, it would be nice to understand more about the facility and what happened there. But at the same time, I also sort of feel like, maybe that would be kind of cool side material, but it definitely isn't the main. And I think it would be a mistake to focus on that instead of the core and central plot of Stranger Things, which is really this group of kids in a protracted coming of age, or an expanded coming of age story that isn't told with a lot of the
Darkest Minds. It was called The Darkest Minds. I'm sorry.
The Darkest Minds. Okay. Oh, you know what? I did see that. Oh well. Yeah. Oh, okay. Okay.
It was a big flop.
Yeah. I did see that. Yeah, I wasn't a huge fan of that either. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Well, in any event, I don't think that is the direction that they should go in, because I feel like that what makes Stranger Things is it is at its core and at its best, it is a whole lot of people who do not have any power at all. And that is what really makes it relatable and central. And 11, of course, she does have power, but that power is it's not used Deus Ex Machina. And I feel like if you have a bunch of people, this is the problem that I've always had with some of the Marvel universe pieces, where the superpowers are used sort of to save the day instead of being used as sort of an extension of who the people are. I mean, Thor does a good job of it, but there's not a lot. And Stranger Things sort of excels because it doesn't fall into that same trap. And so I don't know, I sort of disagree. I'm not really sure that I want to see more about the other kids. I mean, again, as side material, maybe.
Right, that's what I mean. Like side material, that'd be great,
As a
And then,
novel.
and as I thought about it, they really needed to address it in somehow. They needed to address it somehow. So I'm definitely for that. Oh man, we're running out of time. Before we only have like 10 minutes left before we turn into a pumpkin. Before we go, what's some last bit of things that you want to talk about season 3 to wrap it up?
Well, I think although we didn't get too far into it, I do think that the Joyce and Hopper relationship, where people complained about Hopper being, kind of like, oh, he's the abusive boyfriend and all that stuff. I feel like that was really short-sighted. I, if you know Hopper and you've seen him over the past 3 seasons altogether, you realize there is a sense to this character that is just totally unique, and it's I don't feel like it's abusive. I don't feel like it's emotionally harrowing. It's Hopper being Hopper in a way that is this is basically the core of his expression, and it doesn't feel demeaning, and it doesn't feel any of that stuff, and I'm really sensitive to that stuff. So if I didn't feel it, I'm not saying nobody else could feel it, but if I don't feel offended by it, I feel like, well, maybe we really need to kind of go back and revisit that. That seemed kind of alarmist to me. So I loved that. I loved having Hopper and Joyce have that, all of those moments together, because they all felt totally authentic. I mean, it was like looking at some of the couples that I know.
Yeah. Yeah, and they have history, relationship history, right? In the past, I think they explored it a little bit in the first season, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So overall, what would you give on a scale from 1 to 10? 10 being the best. What would you give season 3?
In relationship to all the other seasons, or just like in relationship to all other media?
No, just how do you feel about it?
If I were to score this just sort of like on its own merits, I would give season 3 probably an 8.9.
Really? Okay. I give it a 9.
Nice.
And it was just fantastic, I mean, there's a couple of nitpicks, but I mean, you can nitpick anything, really.
It's true.
But it was just an amazing season. Very surprising because the promos weren't very well good, so that's why I was like kind of surprised that it was as good as it was. And you know what? I'm gonna just, I think this next season, I'm not gonna even have expectations. I'm just gonna watch it. And
yeah,
but I have to say, it was a really good season, and so looking forward to the next season.
Me too.
So how can we get you in social media and all that good stuff?
Social media, you can follow me on Twitter at followingbliss1, on and every other social media as well too. And you can visit my websites at moviesmakethemeal.com and criticallaughs.com.
Why are the laughs so critical?
I'm critical of laughs. That's all.
Oh, you're critical of laughs. Okay. Even my mother likes it.
Oh, I caught you off guard.
She don't like anything. That's my mother too. She was trying not to like it, and then she was like giggling at certain parts. I'm like, you like it. She's like, what is this crap? And then she was watching it, and then she was like giggling and stuff. So, she liked it too. You can get me at Kente F on Twitter, and of course, Kente Ferguson on Instagram. And we'll be back with our new episode of the Spotlight coming up soon. No more. We won't be doing Cinema du Fromage next Thursday, but we will be back to review Strange Brew, not Stranger Things, but Strange Brew, the 1983 Canadian cult classic. With that said, maybe we'll do another Spotlight next week. With that said, you guys have a wonderful weekend that's coming up. Peace.